Hello, and welcome to the 6th Mother Tongue Film Festival. Thank you for joining us. Live real-time captioning and American Sign Language interpretation are available during today's program. To view the simulcast that include these services, please use the link provided on the comment section. If you're viewing this program after the live broadcast, please note that it will also be available on our website with closed captioning. Our conversation will be in English and Persian and will be closed captioned in English. My name is Ann Peterson, and I am the project manager of the Mother Tongue Film Festival. While the festival is all virtual this year, we acknowledge that this conversation would normally take place on the traditional and ancestral land of the Piscataway. We recognize that the Piscataway people are alive and flourishing members of the Washington, D.C. community today. At this time, when we're together virtually rather than in person, we urge you to continue to seek and understand the history and the present of the land on which you stand, and acknowledge the indigenous people who have been living and working on that land from time immemorial. Founded in 2016, the Mother Tongue Film Festival opens on the United Nations International Mother Languages Day, which is February 21st. The festival is an effort of the Recovering Voices, a Smithsonian initiative involving the National Museum of Natural History, the Center for Folklife and Cultural Heritage, the National Museum of American Indian, and the Asia Pacific Center American Center. We are grateful to our Smithsonian and non-Smithsonian partners for their support and extend our thanks to our sponsors. A special thank you to the Smithsonian's National Museum of Asian Art, who have made this conversation possible. Today, I'd like to welcome you to the Q&A about the Forbidden Strings. This program is presented as part of the 2021 Mother Tongue Film Festival, the healing power of storytelling. As always, we highlight the confluence of cinematic and mother languages. I invite you to participate in the conversation with director Hasan Noori and producer Afsaneh Salari about the Forbidden Strings, an official selection of this year's festival and also a US premiere. We'll be taking your comments and questions in the live chat below, so please participate. And if you're new to the festival, I'll also encourage you to check out our website, mothertongue.si.edu, to learn about the featured films and upcoming events. Your feedback is also very welcome on the festival's social media channels and in our audience survey, also linked in the chat. And now I'd like to welcome our guest, Hasan Noori, joining us from Tehran, Iran, Afsaneh Salari, joining us from Paris, France, and also Tom Vick, joining us from Rockville, Maryland. He will be doing the introduction, or the interview. And finally, Mana Kashfi, who is joining us from Washington, D.C. and will help us with translations. Welcome, everyone.
Thank you, Anne. As Anne mentioned, I'm Tom Vick, curator of film at the Freer and Sackler Galleries, which are the Smithsonian's National Museum of Asian Art. And it's my pleasure to be joined by Hasan and Afsaneh today. So maybe if each of you could introduce yourselves, maybe starting with you, Hasan, a few words.
حسن جان لطف کنین خودتون رو معرفی کنین.
سلام خدمت همه. من حسن نوری هستم. اهل افغانستانم ولی در ایران زندگی میکنم، یعنی مهاجر هستم اینجا و کارگردان فیلمم که هستم.
Hello everyone, I am Hasan Noori. I am from Afghanistan, an immigrant to Iran, and I'm also a filmmaker.
Afsaneh?
Hi everyone, thanks so much for being here and for listening to this conversation. My name is Afsaneh Salari. I'm an Iranian director and producer, and I'm based in Paris.
Thank you both. So Hasan, starting with you, as you mentioned, you, like the subjects of your film, are from Afghanistan but living in Iran. So I'm wondering how you met the members of the band and decided to make a film about them.
حسن با شما شروع میکنیم. مثل موضوع فیلمتون شما هم یک افغانی هستین که در ایران زندگی میکنین. چگونه با شخصیت‌های فیلم آشنا شدین و چه باعث شد که نخستین فیلمتون رو درباره آنها بسازین؟ انگیزتون چی بود؟
خب با بچه‌های گروه ارکین توی فضای دانشجویی در واقع آشنا شدیم، یعنی توی خوابگاه دانشجویی بچه‌ها رفت آمد می‌کردن، از اونجا میشناختیم همو. توی مهمونیامون توی دور همیامون حضور داشتن، ساز میزدن و ما هم در واقع اونجا ابتدای آشناییمون.
I met the members of the band in a collegiate setting, actually in our dormitories. They would come and go, and at many of our student gatherings, at our parties, they were present and they would perform their music, and that's how I initially got to know them.
And in general, what is the situation for Afghans living in Iran? Sorry.
Give us a moment, Tommy's going to بفرمایید حسن جان. درباره چی باعث شد که تصمیم گرفتین نخستین فیلم رو درباره این گروه بسازین؟
آره، ما توی در واقع تعاملاتمون متوجه شدیم که بچه‌ها خیلی یعنی نمیتونن توی ایران کنسرت برگزار بکنن و همیشه آرزو اینو داشتن که هم برگردن کشورشون یک بار اونجا رو ببینن و هم اولین کنسرتشون رو اونجا توی شهر بامیان جلو مجسمه‌های بودا که تخریب شدن داشته باشن.
As I got to know the band, I came to realize that they couldn't perform in Iran, and one of their biggest ambitions was to return to Afghanistan and to perform their very first concert in Bamiyan in the presence of the Buddha statues, or the remnants of the Buddha statues.
وقتی که از این قضیه مطلع شدم فکر کردم که احتمالا قصه جالبی باشه برای تعریف کردن، خصوصا که خودم هم هیچ وقت افغانستان ندیده بودم و یه فرصتی به وجود می اومد که بتونم برگردم کشورم، یعنی برم کشورم و برای منم بامیان به دلیل اینکه شهری هست که پدر مادرم اونجا زندگی کردن، اونجا به دنیا اومدم، جذابیت داشت و می‌خواستم زادگاه در واقع پدر مادرم رو ببینم و فکر کردم که شاید بشه این دوتا علاقه رو به همدیگه پیوند زد و از دلش یه فیلم در آورد.
Once I learned of their story and their quest, it was very appealing to me because it gave me an opportunity to also travel to Afghanistan, somewhere I'd never been, and to Bamiyan, the birthplace of my parents. And I was very eager to see where my parents came from. And this seemed like the perfect opportunity to combine two passions.
یه نکته دیگر رو بگم، البته این فقط یه بخشی از ماجرا هست و خود زندگی این بچه‌ها، شرایطی که توی اون وفادار موندن به هنرشون و بقیه مسائل برای من خب مهم بود، مسئله مهاجرت، همه اینا رو احساس کردن که میتونن به بهانه این سفر در واقع در موردش صحبت بکنن.
The opportunity to travel back to Afghanistan was just one aspect that influenced the decision to make the film. Telling the story of the band members' commitment to their art, to their music, and their experience as immigrants and the immigrant story in general was also a very important factor that I wanted to touch on in the process of making this film.
Yeah, just to follow up on that, obviously immigration is a big story in the United States as well, and I'm wondering how Afghan immigrants are treated in Iran. Is there prejudice or is there discrimination? Could you just talk a little bit about the Afghan community there?
سوژه مهاجرت اینجا در جامعه آمریکایی هم خیلی دربارش بحث میشه. به طور کلی در ایران با افغانها چگونه رفتار میشه و آیا تبعیض نژادی وجود داره؟ درباره جامعه افغانی در ایران برای ما صحبت کنید.
ببینید، من چون از یه بک‌گراندی دارم میام که خیلی اون سویه های تیز زندگی مهاجرت یعنی به من برخورد نکرده و تجربه مهاجرتی خود من به شخص خیلی متفاوت هست، ولی اگر بخوایم که کلی‌تر به قضیه نگاه بکنیم و خود تجربه مثلا 14 چند میلیون آدم رو در ایران بخوایم تحلیل بکنیم، قضیه فرق میکنه.
I come from a unique immigrant background. I haven't experienced the sharpest aspects of it or the most difficult aspects of being an Afghan immigrant in Iran. But if we wanted to look at it more broadly and look at the 4 decades of immigration experience or immigrant experience for Afghans in Iranian society, it hasn't been without challenges.
فکر میکنم که زندگی چند میلیون آدم در طی 40 سال حتما نقاط مثبت و منفی زیادی داره. جدای این که من از مهاجرت هموطنانم به ایران طی این 4 دهه دفاع میکنم و تصورم بر اینه که تجربه مثبتی بوده، اما همواره سویه‌های منفیش خیلی به چشم اومده و خیلی روی زندگی روزمره اونها تاثیر گذاشته و من فکر میکنم که الان بعد 4 دهه اگر بخوایم در مورد مهاجرت افغان‌ها به ایران قضاوت بکنیم، به نظرم تجربه بسیار تلخی بوده.
Overall, if you look at the life experience of the millions of Afghans who have immigrated to Iran, there have been positives and negatives, and I would be inclined to defend the experience in general. But the negative aspects of the Afghan immigrant experience in Iran are very visible and have had severe impacts on the daily lives of my compatriots. And if I were to assess the daily life experience of millions of Afghan immigrants over the past 4 decades, I would have to say that it's been a very bitter experience.
ببین، آشفتگی حقوقی که در مورد وضعیت مهاجرین در ایران هست باعث میشه که توی لایه‌های مختلف جامعه سوء استفاده‌های شکل بگیره. به لحاظ ساختاری از خیلی از حقوق اولیه محروم بشن، خیلی از مشاغل و اجازه نداشته باشن کار بکنن، توی مدرسه هنرستان نتونن برن، توی دانشگاه بعضی رشته ها رو نتونن برن، یه سری شهرها براشون ممنوعه بشه و به قول یکی از پژوهشگرای ایرانی آرش نصر اصفهانی، نجات پرستی روزمره، صف نونوایی توی اتوبوس، توی خیابون، همه جا حضور داره و وقتی که 4 دهه این اتفاق رخ بده احتمالا ما با یک یا چند نسلی مواجه خواهیم بود که نه اعتماد به نفس دارن، نه عزت نفس دارن و پیامدهای اون نسل‌های بعدی رو هم احتمالا دامنش میگیرن.
Afghan immigrants overall have been denied rights. They've been denied basic human rights, which has made them vulnerable to manipulation and exploitation. They're denied the right to employment opportunities, to education opportunities, and it affects every aspect of daily life. And as an Iranian researcher has said, Arash Asfahani has concluded in his work, they experience racism on a daily basis in the most basic form, from standing in line at the bakery to riding on the bus. It's everywhere. It surrounds them on a daily basis. And when a community of millions experiences this over 4 decades, it robs them of their confidence, of their self-identity, and it has a lasting impact not only on that generation, but the generation that comes after them.
و به عنوان نکته آخر، به خاطر سیاست‌های عدم ادغام هیچ وقت مهاجرین افغانستانی توی ایران خودی محسوب نشده، همواره این حس دیگری بودن به ما القا شده، هیچ وقت پیوند عاطفی نتونستیم برقرار بکنیم و هر امکانی برای بیرون رفتن از این شرایط که به وجود بیاد، مثل 2015 که سیل گسترده از مهاجرین قاچاقی رفتن سمت اروپا، از اونها استفاده میکنن که از این وضعیت بیان بیرون. بنابراین فکر میکنم که افغان ها در ایران از این مهاجرت راضی نباشن، هرچند که به صورت فردی مثلا قصه من یا بعضی از هموطنان ممکن متفاوت باشه.
Because of the various social and political policies that are in place, Afghan immigrants in Iran have never been able to feel like Iranians. They've never been able to establish roots. They've always had a sense of not belonging, of being foreigners. And this has had a severe impact. Therefore, they seek out opportunities to leave the country. And the wave of Afghans who left Iran in 2015 and tried to get to Europe is an indication of that. So even though for certain individuals it has been a different experience, like Hasan's own experience as an immigrant, they haven't faced the challenges that he speaks of. Overall, most Afghans have not had a positive experience living in Iran.
I see. Thank you. And just a reminder to the audience, if you have questions, feel free to start typing them in and we'll try to get to them at the end of this conversation. But now I'd like to bring Afsaneh into the conversation. Could you talk a bit about your company, Maniacs, which is a sort of unique model for producing films, and how you got involved with Hasan's film?
Thank you so much, Tom. It's always difficult to talk after Hasan when he dive into the issue of Afghan community in Iran, because that's something very sensitive and also very unspoken. So to have him talk about it, actually, it's always makes me very moved. Well, Maniacs. So as I said in the beginning, I'm a film director, first of all. So I consider myself a film director and then a film producer. I studied in Europe, I studied in France, and then I studied in another, and I did another master in documentary directing, for which I also learned a bit of production, and I learned a little bit about how to fundraise for films, how to pitch films, how to go to markets. So at some point, I realized that this is a certain knowledge that will help a lot me and also my other fellow filmmaker friends in Iran to have some sort of access to international scene, because to finance your film inside Iran, the public money goes, first of all, it's very little, and then it goes only to certain films. So we realized that me and my other friends who co-founded the collective together, we realized that we actually want to create something, an alternative space where we can make our own films, where we can produce films of independent filmmakers and also bring them to the international scene all together. And as I am a film director myself, I've always been against losing my independence and losing my rights and everything. So we realized that we want to have filmmakers and we want to give them the majority copyright, but we also want to be there in terms of if there's any need for creative consultation, to, as I said, to fundraising. And of course, it means that we can make only low budget films, because then we stay very, very, very small. We don't want to do co-production. We don't want to, as I said, we don't want to share rights, because we want to keep it for the filmmaker himself. Mm-hmm. And I co-founded the collective in 2015 in Tehran with two other friends, Sepand and Hoda. And at the same time, I was doing the research for my own documentary about an Afghan family. So I was very sensitive to the subject matter, and I was doing the research within Afghan community in Iran. And that is where I met Hasan, because I wanted to make the film with a second generation of Afghans in Iran. Mm-hmm. And Hasan is a second generation. He was a filmmaker, and he introduced me, my protagonist, for the other film. And as we were doing the development for that film, he pitched me the Forbidden Strings, and he told me, hey, I see that you're also doing this thing with your collective. I have this project. Maybe we can do something about it. And such a coincidence. I said, of course, that's what actually we're looking for. And you're not Iranian, and I know to what extent it can be difficult for you to have any access to any Iranian money. And we started a project, and we actually started both projects parallel at the same time. So I was producing the Forbidden Strings, and Hasan was doing the sound for the silhouettes, and at the same time helping a lot with me getting integrated into the Afghan community. So that's how we made two feature films about Afghan community at the same time together, and we teamed up. And what was very, very interesting for me, because this is Hasan's very first film. This is, he was graduating from University of Tehran in filmmaking, and he was starting this film. But what was very intriguing for me was that he was very, very courageous, and his courage and his drive was something, because it was my first producing work as well. So I was a little bit hesitant, and we were starting a film. We're traveling to Afghanistan, so there are a lot of costs. We need to raise a lot of money. But then he was so sure of himself that I was like, okay, I can trust this guy. And yeah, that's how it started.
Great. Well, speaking of being courageous, one of the sort of centerpieces of the film is this trip you take down a very dangerous highway to get to Bamiyan, which I understood you undertook without letting your producer, Afsaneh, know that you were doing it. So I'm wondering what led to that somewhat dangerous decision to put your cast and crew in that kind of situation. And then also, Afsaneh, how you reacted when you found out that he did this.
حسن جان میپرسن که میدونم که بدونین که به تهیه کننده فیلم به افسانه خانم بگید به بامیان رفتین. چی شد که شما و تیم فیلمبرداری تصمیم گرفتین دست به چنین سفر خطرناکی بزنید؟
خب همه چیز خیلی ناگهانی اتفاق افتاد و اونجوری که ما برنامه ریزی کردیم در واقع پیش نرفت و حتی ما با خودمون هم، یعنی من با خودم هم هماهنگ نکردم که زمینی این مسیر رو برم، چه برسه که بخوام جای دیگه اطلاع بدم و همه چیز خیلی ناگهانی و خیلی سریع اتفاق افتاد.
It happened very suddenly and not at all how we had planned. I hadn't even come to terms with it for myself to travel to Bamiyan by road, much less being prepared to share that with anyone else. So it came about very unexpectedly.
یعنی برنامه ما اینجوری بود که هوایی بریم بامیان، به خاطر اینکه اون جاده‌ای که کابل رو به بامیان وصل میکنه شاید خطرناکترین جاده دنیا باشه، اگر نه حتما خطرناکترین جاده افغانستان هست و توی افغانستان به جاده مرگ معروفه. بنابراین ما میخواستیم هوایی بریم، اما متاسفانه پروازمون کنسل شد، یعنی اون پروازی که قرار بود باش بریم بامیان پر شد پیش از اینکه ما سوار شدیم و فقط یک راه داشتیم، یا زمینی از بین طالبان عبور بکنیم یا برگردیم به ایران و خط بکشیم روی رویاهام.
We had planned to travel to Bamiyan from Kabul by air. The road from Kabul to Bamiyan is one of the most dangerous in the world, and definitely the most dangerous in Kabul. It's known as the road of death. But the flights that we had counted on were canceled, and another one was full before we were able to board. So our only option was to either make the journey by land or to return to Iran and give up on our dream.
پس ما چیز کردیم، یعنی بچه ها رو آوردیم و گفتیم تصمیم با شماست، آیا میخواین که برای این کنسرت از این جاده عبور بکنین؟ و اگر اونها نه میگفتن باید برمیگشتیم و اگر آره میگفتن تیم فیلمسازی اخلاقا باید باشون همراهی میکرد، هرچند که همه رو مخیر گذاشتیم، یعنی به اختیار خودشون، هر کسی که نمیخواد میتونه نیاد، ولی خب همه مصمم بودیم که این راهی رو که شروع کردیم تا آخر بریم.
So we gathered the band and left the decision up to them. We told them that they had full control over the decision making. If they wanted to continue, the film crew would continue on with them. And if not, then we would return. We also allowed every member of the film crew to make the decision for themselves as well. But in the end, everybody decided to make the journey together.
نکته آخر این که ما بتونیم این همچین تصمیم بگیریم حدوداً شاید 17-18 ساعت طول کشید، ولی از لحظه‌ای که تصمیم گرفتیم تا لحظه‌ای که راه افتادیم وارد این مسیر شدیم شاید فقط 2 ساعت زمان برد و ما هیچ کاری، یعنی نمیتونستیم به کسی اطلاع بدیم، نمیتونستیم هماهنگی انجام بدیم، آمادگی بگیریم، فقط رفتیم که برسیم.
It took about 17 or 18 hours for the group to make the decision to travel to Bamiyan by land. But from the moment the decision was made to the moment where we started out on the journey was only about 2 hours. So there really wasn't enough time to let anyone else know or bring anybody else into the fold.
And Afsaneh, what was your reaction when you found out that he did this?
Well, I've never been to Afghanistan, so anything I know from that road or the reputation it has was through Hasan or through friends. And of course, like when you're especially too far away, when you're in Paris and you hear this, you just panic. It's too much. And he actually let me know like maybe 2 or 3 days after, not even right away. I thought that they've gone by flight and it's been as it's planned. But then, I mean, in general, I'm personally very much against this because I mean, in the end, it served the idea of the film. It's in a way like a climax. It's interesting. It gives this very, very strong dramatic beat to the narrative. But then we're making documentaries. So I personally do not believe in endangering the life of the protagonist. And I think yeah, I mean, at any cost, that's not something I would repeat or I would do. So if a filmmaker, if a director wants to do such things, then it's better he does it without any consultation with me.
So kind of switching topics here, Hasan, what is the rock music scene like in Iran? I mean, I know bands like Pink Floyd and Metallica are very popular, but how do people, hear this music? Are there, is there like a club scene where bands play? What is the sort of, I think people would be really, really interested to know what the scene is like there.
حسن ممکنه کمی درباره فضای موسیقی راک در ایران صحبت کنید؟ میدونم که گروه های مثل پینک فلوید و متالیکا خیلی طرفدار دارن در ایران، اما کلا مردم چجوری ارتباط برقرار میکنن با این نوع موسیقی؟ کجا میتونن این موسیقی رو کشف کنن و باش ارتباط برقرار کنن؟
به نظرم ذائقه غالب توی ایران موسیقی راک نیست. گروه هایی از جوانان احتمالا بیشتر علاقمند هستن به این موزیک، تو این فضا کار میکنن، میشنون و خیلی حرفه‌ای هستن. گروه های خیلی خوبی توی ایران هست، شاید مشهد پیشروترینشون توی مشهد باشه، تهران خیلی گروه های خوبی داره و آره، هم پینک فلوید هم متالیکا توی ایران خب خیلی شناخته شده است، خیلی موزیکاشون کاور میشه و اون بچه‌هایی که توی این فضای راک در واقع زیست میکنن همشون میشناسن و همشون سعی میکنن که به عنوان یه الگو احتمالاً بهش نگاه کنن.
Rock music is not generally the mainstream music that has a lot of followers in Iran. It's mostly young people who are fans and who follow the trends, who produce it, who are very familiar with it. And the young people who work in this genre work very professionally. There's very strong groups in both Mashhad and Tehran, very strong rock music scenes in both Mashhad and Tehran. And of course, Pink Floyd and Metallica are well known. Many of the Iranian groups or Iranian bands who play rock music in Iran cover their songs. And it is a scene that's generally driven by the energies and the enthusiasm of the young people.
و اگر که بچه‌ها بخوان یه همچین موزیکایی رو بشنون یا پیدا بکنن، بیشتر باید زیر زمین دنبالش بگردن.
And if people want to listen to this music or discover it, it's very much an underground scene.
I see. Interesting. Afsaneh, getting back to you, I know that I program an annual Iranian Film Festival, and I know that there are a lot of restrictions on narrative, fiction filmmaking. A lot of approvals need to be gotten on scripts, and a lot of restrictions on what you can show and do. And I'm wondering if it's similar when you're producing documentaries there, or if there's a little more freedom.
Yeah, certainly there's a bit of more freedom because there's more freedom in the style. In the way you make documentary films, in the issues you touch, but also the way the government is somehow treating the procedure. But in general, for example, for feature films, you really have to get an authorization to make the film. Your script has to be approved by a certain organization in order for you to pass to the production phase. But for documentaries, you do not need that authorization in the very beginning. You can start shooting the film. If you want to screen the film, of course, in TV channels or in VOD platforms, Iranian VOD platforms, you have to receive a screening authorization from, I guess, the same organization that approves that this film can be publicly seen, but you don't need it for festivals. But in general, if you want to shoot anything in public spaces in Iran, whether it's with your very small DSLR camera or with a very big crew, you have to ask for permission. You have to ask for an authorization. And to get that, you have to also somehow write the plot of the film and explain what the film is about and what are the issues being discussed.
I see. And has the film been shown in Iran or Afghanistan? And if so, what was the reaction?
Yes, the film was shown in Iran last year, like a year and a half ago, in our major documentary film festival. in the national competition, and I assume it was very well received. We were both very, very surprised. We had also extra, we had like requests, the festival had requests for extra screenings. And yeah, we received a lot of good feedback from people, because we were both very much wondering what's going to happen. There aren't many films being made about this issue in Iran. Actually, no Afghan filmmaker has made like any serious documentary about Afghan community in Iran. And we were both like wondering how would the people react, because still a quite racist society vis-a-vis Afghans. So for me, I was very curious to see how people would react to it, but it was just marvelous. It was very interesting. And then a few months ago, it had its national premiere in Afghanistan in the Lajavad Film Festival, where Hasan received the Best Directing Award for the film. And yeah, he can maybe tell about the experience in Afghanistan. Well, it went online, I guess, right, Hasan?
Yes, please, Hasan.
نه
درباره اکران شدن فیلم، نمایش دادن
آره،
فیلم
یا
در
فیدبک‌هایی که
افغانستان.
افغانستان گرفتی، آره، که چطور بوده اینا.
آره، در واقع اولین جشنواره ملی افغانستان، یعنی در طول تاریخ اون کشور اولین جشنواره ملی که برگزار شد، خب فیلم توی 6 تا رشته کاندید جایزه شد، بهترین کارگردانی رو گرفت و همه دوستایی که و کسایی که منو میشناختن یا تونستن پیدا بکنن توی فضای مجازی خیلی خوشحال بودن، خیلی ابراز علاقه کردن نسبت به فیلم و یه جور حسی که انگار این حرفا باید زده میشد، یه بخشی از این حرفا در مورد فضای مهاجرت و هیچ وقت گفته نشده و الان دارن میشنون. توی افغانستان هم آره ریاکشن خیلی خوب.
The film was shown at the first National Film Festival that took place in Afghanistan. It was nominated in 6 categories and won for Best Director. It received a lot of support and positive feedback on social media, and all of the feedback seemed to indicate that people were eager for these issues, for the issue of the Afghan community in Iran, their experience as immigrants, to have light shown upon it and for it to be discussed more openly and publicly.
Great. Well, congratulations. Yeah. Reminder to the audience, we have a few minutes left, and if you have any questions, feel free to type them in, and we will get to them as they come in. I guess the other question that lingers after the film, which kind of has a rather sad ending when the band just kind of ends up breaking up. What are the members of the band doing now? Have they returned to playing music, or have they kind of given up on that?
آخر فیلم غمگین بود چون که اعضای گروه یه جورایی ناامید شده بودن. الان چی کار میکنن؟ برگشتن به صحنه موسیقی و چی براشون گذشته از موقعی که تولید فیلم تموم شد؟
یه مقدار صدا شاید بد بیاد، احساس میکنم که اینترنت هم ضعیف شده، ولی آره متاسفانه تلخ بود پایان فیلم، ولی کاری از دست ما بر نمی اومد. شاید واقعیتی که توش زندگی میکنیم به همین میزان تلخ، شاید تلختر حتی باشه. ما خیلی امید داشتیم که شاید این فیلم، شاید اون کنسرت بتونه نجات بده گروه رو و سر پا بمونن این بچه‌ها، ولی انگار که رویا پردازی ماها کافی نبود برای اینکه واقعیت کوتاه بیاد و در نهایت منجر به فروپاشی گروه شد.
The end of the film was very difficult. It was bitter, but perhaps the reality that we all exist in is even more bitter. We had a lot of hope that the concert in Bamiyan would keep the band together, give them motivation to go on, but unfortunately, that's not how it panned out.
شاید مثل صحنه پایانی فیلم پاپیون، اونجایی که کاراکتر میتونه در نهایت فرار بکنه و آزادی خودش رو به دست بیاره، به همین صورت بچه‌ها جدا جدا خطاب به روزگار، این که هنوز سر پا هستن، یعنی روزگار خطاب قرار میدن که هنوز سر پا هستن و شاید نه در قالب گروه ولی به صورت انفرادی هنوز دارن مبارزه میکنن. حکیم توی کارگاه نجاریش هنوز داره ساز میزنه، اکبر توی کمپ پناهندگی هنوز داره ساز میزنه، محمد مجبور ساعتهای طولانی کار کنه ولی کماکان ساز میزنه. فیلم فایت کلوب رو به یاد بیارین، لزوما مشت خوردن و کتک خوردن به این معنا نیست که از پادر یا شاید تو رو بتونه قوی تر بکنه. من فکر میکنم وضعیت بچه ها الان یه همچین چیزی هستش توی فایت کلوب، مدام دارن از واقعیت صلب و سخت مشت و لگد میخورن ولی سر پا هنوز.
Perhaps like the final scene in the movie Papillon, where the protagonist escapes and seeks his freedom, the band members are also still fighting for their freedom, not within the framework of the band, but each of them individually is resisting and fighting. Hakim still plays music in the wood shop. Akbar still plays music in the refugee camp that he currently lives in. Mohammed works very long hours, but he has also continued to play music. And I would like you to remember the movie Fight Club, where the message is that being beaten down is not the end of you. And each of these band members is carrying on in the tradition of Fight Club, where they're still fighting.
That's very inspiring. Thank you. I guess my final question for both of you is, what projects are you working on now? Are you still collaborating, or are you doing separate things? We'd love to know what might be coming from you each.
Yeah, so me on my side, I'm working on a project here in France. I'm directing a feature-length film here, and I'm producing a feature-length in Iran with another filmmaker. Yeah, we're not collaborating for now.
Oh, okay. And Hasan, what about you? What are you working on?
حسن جان الان چی کار میکنین؟ رو چه پروژه‌ای دارین و پروژه بعدیتون که کار بعدی که ما از شما خواهیم دید چی است؟ Oh, I think.
Yeah, it looks like he's frozen.
I think the connection might not be cooperative.
Yeah. There we are. Hasan, are you back?
ببخش من هیچ صدایی ندارم.
الان صدای من میاد؟
الان فکر میکنم صدا رو داره.
بله، پرسیدن که الان رو چی دارین کار میکنین، چه پروژه‌ای دارین و کار بعدی که ما از شما خواهیم دید.
Oh, we've lost him.
We lost him.
Well, maybe he's coming back. There he is. Okay.
صدای من دارین الان؟
بله، شما صدای ما رو میشنوین؟
من خیلی صدا رو بد دارم ولی فکر می‌کنم یه چیزایی میشنم.
پرسیدن که الان مشغول چه کاری هستین و پروژه بعدی.
منو دارین؟
بله، صدای ما رو میشنوین؟
آها. الان خوب شده. ببخشید.
پرسیدن که الان فعالیتتون چیه، رو چه پروژه‌ای دارین کار میکنین و کار بعدی که ما از شما خواهیم دید چه خواهد بود؟
اوکی، سوال فکر میکنم کامل متوجه شدم. راستش یه مقداری خب شرایط کرونا تاثیر گذاشته روی کار کردن. الان صدای خوب دارید شما؟
بله.
مونا جان، اوکی. کرونا تاثیر گذاشته خب روی کار کردن، خصوصا توی ایران و البته همه جای جهان. من یه پروژه دیگه رو هم توی همین فضایی که در واقع فضای تارهای ممنوعه هستش دارم. توی مرحله ریسرچ متریال هستیم، داریم دیولوپش میکنیم ولی کار مدام استوب میخوره. و مسئله من در مورد یه نسل از مهاجرین هست که از همه جا رانده شدن و جایی نمیتونن خودشون رو وصل بکنن. اینکه اینها چجوری زیست میکنن توی یک همچین فضای دوگانه و متعارضی برای من مهم هست. این دفعه در واقع توی این فیلم مسئله زنان، یا چون کاراکترم دختر هست، مسئله زنان یعنی یه لایه دیگه اضافه میشه که حالا یه دختر اگر بخواد توی یه جامعه‌ای آنچنان که خودش دوست داره باشه با چه مصائبی مواجه میشه.
So the pandemic has had a negative impact on work all over the world, but in Iran in particular. He's currently working on another film project, which is in the research and development phase, but the work is progressing in fits. It's progressing slowly. The focus of the work will be on a generation of immigrants that are stuck between two worlds, stuck between two cultures, and particularly focused on the plight of women and the story of how a woman can be who an immigrant woman can be who she wants, be herself, and with all of the challenges that she will face on a daily basis.
Well, I wish you luck with this and all your future projects. And thank you, Hasan and Afsaneh, for joining us today. And thank you, Mona, for your translation services. And I'd also like to thank everyone who tuned in for this very, very interesting discussion today. I think we've all learned quite a bit. And now I'd like to return things to Anne Peterson to wrap things up.
Great. Thank you, Tom. Yes, thank you, everyone, for a great conversation. I'd just like to also thank our captioner and our ASL interpreters who helped bring this conversation to you. Also, thank you to Sarah Rothman and Kate Haas and Cecilia Halley and the many more people that helped make this conversation possible. Please follow the Recovering Voices page on Facebook to get notifications about our future events, and find us also on YouTube. Visit our website and come back here for the next program, which is a Q&A with the filmmakers behind Eating Up Easter. And that will be on Friday, April 30th. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.